Welcome back to ANOMACON 2025, and this one is a special one for me personally, guys. I am here with my mentor, and you know him, you know his work, you may have seen him at other conferences or read his books, and I just can't believe we're finally getting him as a speaker here at ANOMACON, and you can see on your screen what we will be talking about today. But with further ado, I want to introduce again, one of my personal heroes, my mentor, Peter Robbins. Welcome to ANOMACON, Peter.
Thanks, Ryan. I wish you could actually welcome me to Edinburgh.
I know. Hey, we will make it happen.
One of my favorite cities in the world.
Yes, well, we would be happy to have you here. But Peter, for those of our audience here at ANOMACON today who might not be familiar with your work, I don't know how that's possible, but we do have new people getting interested in these topics every day. Do you want to kind of give us the rundown on who Peter Robbins is, if you don't mind?
Well, I'm a writer whose work has been focused on truly anomalous UFO phenomena and its implications for humanity for a bunch of years. I host a weekly radio show on KUNX digital broadcasting here in the States. It's called Meanwhile Here on Earth, and it's old school, long form, 2-hour in-depth interview conversations or panel discussions. Otherwise, helping to organize conferences, consult, work on documentaries, and I will say that in real time right now, I believe in 2 days, on the 19th of September, the next episode of Ancient Aliens will air, and it will be about abductions. It's called the Abduction Files. I haven't seen it, but I was part of it, and my intuition is that it's quality programming. 8 o'clock, History Channel, on the 19th, Ancient Aliens.
Oh, fantastic. I'll definitely be checking that one out. That's for sure. Awesome, Peter. Well, I kind of want to let you take the wheel from here. I'm kind of going to be the eyes and the ears for the audience here as we navigate through your wonderful slideshow that you put together for us for this talk. So you just let me know when you want me to switch to new slides, and I will let you take it from here. This is a fascinating discussion and presentation you've set up for us. So yeah, whenever you're ready.
I'm ready.
Cool.
First slide. In 1978, as you can see from the headline in the New York Times article here, the United Nations called for debate on UFOs. It was a radical suggestion at the time, not popular with representatives, but it was something that the higher-ups wanted to do. I was all of 2.5 years or so into, I won't say my interest in UFOs, but my complete obsession with the subject, which became an interest once the obsession was tamed. And my very first mentor, and you can move to the next image now, was a remarkable man on the right there, Coleman von Kavetsky. Coleman and I met about a year, less than a year into my interest in the subject. I really had known no one who was involved in the work. Coleman lived in Queens, but he was Hungarian national, and during World War II had been a staff officer in the Hungarian Royal Army, involved in photo analysis and photo education. He emigrated to the States after serving an extraordinary piece of karma for 7 years after the end of World War II, because he spoke German, Hungarian, Austrian, English. The Allies, particularly America, used him to repatriate and connect up Jews who had survived the Holocaust and reunite them with their families. And he was invited to become an American citizen in 1952, emigrated a few months before the famous Washington, D.C. overflights. And because of his photo interest and being a military scientist, he became involved in the subject. And when I knew him, he was already in his 70s. considered a national hero by the Hungarian American community, and very welcoming to me in giving me an opportunity to start from the ground up. Anyway, 2 years or so into our friendship, he told me that this event was going to happen. And he had a friendly acquaintanceship with the Secretary General of the UN, Kurt Waldheim. Awkwardly, several years later, that we learned he was an SS officer during the war, but we won't let things like that get in our way at the moment. And he invited myself and my first contemporary colleague in the work, Antonio Huneeus, a walking encyclopedia of the subject of UFOs, and in 3 languages, to edit a long document paper that he was presenting. And so that is how we became involved in this project. On the left is Sir Eric Gehry, Prime Minister of the small Caribbean nation of Grenada, whose initiative it was to have this series of meetings. Next pictures. This is the cover of the probably 70 or 80 page document that Coleman generated for the UN. I think it was very much ahead of its time and pointing to issues that we weren't considering, we the West, so to say, at the time. For example, the possibility that a truly anomalous UFO incursion over the Soviet Union or America might be misinterpreted as unidentified enemy planes and launch an attack that could result in a terrible conflagration. Next, please. So as we come closer to the time of the event, the paper is printed, and I find myself thanked on the first page there, just below Professor Hermann Oberth, the father of rocketry in Germany. On the right is a sample page showing what at the time was, and is still considered, one of the most authentic, legitimate UFO photos, in this case, of a cloud, of a UFO generating cloud cover, and a series of 3 photos seeing that whole process happen. Next. Okay, so we finally get to this day. And it turns out it's a series of events, the first in October, second in November. November was the big one. And I had planned around this event. One way or another, I was going to be there. I had an invitation. And the day before, I believe it would have been November 26th, a huge blizzard hit New York City. I mean, it shut down everything. For better or worse, a good number of the delegates used it as an excuse not to show up, even if they lived in the area. This was not a subject that they wanted to have to take seriously. I'm sure many of them really loved their nice, cushy jobs and didn't want to go home and say we need to take flying saucers and aliens seriously. Again, 1978, a very different time. I woke up that morning, my home in a little loft in Chinatown in New York City, made my way to the UN, where I met up with my parents. My mom at the time worked for Nikon and took the day off, came into the city. Well, she lived in the city at the time. My dad, too. He's self-employed, curious about the subject, and we met up at the UN. Next image. Here we see some of the particulars of what this special political committee of the General Assembly was all about. Establishment of an agency or a department of the UN for undertaking, coordinating, and disseminating the results of research into unidentified flying objects and related phenomena. That simple. A permanent study committee where countries could exchange data. Nothing more formal than that. Next, please. These are 2 of the original telexes discussing the event. I was very fortunate in that I was able to get a great deal of original printouts from that day, as well as official United Nations photographs because of my connection with Coleman. Next. Well, Here you see a remarkable photograph. Sitting at the representative spot for the island nation of Grenada is Dr. J. Allen Hynek. Bear in mind, I'm a novice still at this. I knew very few people involved. It was still 3 years before I was going to attend my very first UFO conference. And here I am in the gallery of the United Nations listening to Dr. J. Allen Hynek, Dr. Jacques Vallée, Stanton T. Friedman, Gordon Cooper, the astronaut and very pro UFO reality, was in Texas at the time, and his flight was canceled. So his account was read into the record. To the left, you see the gentleman at the far left. That is Wellington Friday, the executive assistant, I forget his exact title, to Sir Eric, who is seated next to him with the sunglasses. Next. Okay, I wanted to show these simply to add to the authentication. This was glued to the back of the photograph, and in each case, all of the relevant information, this being the United Nations and not some UFO group, were very professional in laying out every particular. Next. And once again, Dr. Jacques Vallée, and now we see Dr. Hynek in the upper left. It's worth noting at this time that in New York City, if you were a smoker, the laws were you had to smoke indoors and as much as possible. And there's Dr. Hynek puffing away on his pipe. Next, please. Okay, again, the back of the photo. The United Nations General Assembly Hall, as you might imagine, is a very impressive structure. The Secretariat, the lower building, that when you see pictures of the UN, the tall office building and the rather modern building with the curved top, is where the events sprang from. Next, please. Okay, I had heard of Stanton T. Friedman. I had read a paper or two by him at that point, but I had never heard him speak. And each presenter was as composed and as focused as you can imagine. Again, the great Gordon Cooper to the right, whose statement was read into the record. I should say here also, at this point, I'm there with my folks and kind of front row balcony with an unblocked view of all of the delegates. And the expressions on every one of their faces uniformly was of a poker player at a high stakes game. Everybody, psychological term is flat affect. My deduction from that was none of these men, and it was all men, representatives as I remember at the time, were happy to be there. In fact, some of them almost seemed to look like they felt trapped in the room. I could only imagine some of the things going through their minds because, again, this was, to say, to put it mildly, not a popular subject for them to take up. Next, please. That is Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Coyne, C-O-Y-N-E. Lieutenant Colonel Coyne was involved, I believe, earlier that year in an extraordinary UFO event. He was piloting a helicopter over Ohio when a very large, fully articulated UFO, I'm trying to remember whether it was more football-shaped or ovoid, came in over his craft. He threw it into a dive, and the helicopter started to climb. And as much as he tried to reverse what was going on mechanically, that helicopter rose 1,800 feet toward that UFO before the force was released. His testimony was very compelling. Next, please. And once again, we see Colonel Coyne's background here and a bit on the Grenada proposal. Next. Here it is. This is the craft that was pulling him and his crew up. A very well documented case, and one worth studying. I don't think it's ever been the subject of a book, but it was certainly the subject of a great deal of coverage at the time. At this point, I was not prepared for where this discussion, this event was going to go. We took a break, we came back, and we'll go to our next image now. Okay, once again, we have the full picture of Lieutenant Colonel Coyne here. And I would say it's worth noting, in the first row there, on the right is the representative from Greece, on the left from Guatemala. Both of them fairly self-contained, a Greek representative showing perhaps a little emotion. Next, please. This is where things got quite emotional. For the life of me, I don't remember whether it was Dr. Vallee, Dr. Hynek, or Stan Friedman who introduced the reality that 6 weeks before, off the coast of Australia, a young private pilot, Frederick Valentich, you see on the left a photograph of Frederick Valentich Sr., his father, also a pilot, holding a photo of his son, Frederick Jr. The plane was observed to go off radar after a terrible scraping sound, and after Valentich repeatedly trying to respond to the air traffic controller by saying, after trying to describe what he was encountering, it's not a plane, it's a, and then his voice trailing off. At a certain point, a tragic point, the aircraft simply disappeared from radar and was never seen again. Again, this is only 6 weeks after the fact, and the representative to the United Nations from Australia was there. And whoever the speaker was describing this event at that point turned around and pointed to him and said words to the effect of, Mr. Representative, one of your citizens has either been kidnapped or murdered, and whoever did this is in violation of international law. How is your... The man just glared at him. There's nothing to say, no place to go, no precedent for such an outburst in the United Nations or any other governing body. It was a surprisingly tense moment, and it didn't resolve. It just went on from there. Next image, Ryan. Again, I cite these two photos as simply representative of the general attitude of all of the representatives in the room. And again, because of the weather, there were a good number of empty seats that afternoon. Next. This is a photo of myself and my mom and dad during a break. We are down in the rotunda of the Secretariat. That was my one and only suit. And you can tell it's the 70s because of my dad's sideburns, my glasses. My mom, a dedicated smoker, puffing away there in the rotunda of the UN, as a rather curious, it turned out, official UN photographer came up to us. We were obviously the only kind of family group standing around in there, and he wanted to know who we were and what we were doing there, and we had a nice chat, and he took that photograph. A wonderful statue of I believe it's Zeus in the back there, ancient Greece. And I'll parenthetically say, if you visit New York or you live in New York, and probably most New Yorkers that are listening have never visited the UN. For me, it was a very important destination on class field trips growing up, and occasionally on my own, going through security and heading up to the General Assembly gallery area, putting on your headphones and selecting one of a dozen languages to listen to what was being dealt with. Next. So the event happens. it ends. The coverage is dismissive, let's say. And here you can see it. Delegates bemoan the long speeches. Waldheim says a review is needed, and whatever his background, he was right there. And the motion actually did pass somehow. Next. However, not only did it die in committee, but when Sir Eric came back to New York to finish validating and take care of certain bureaucratic matters, his government was overthrown. The Reagan administration sent in troops to Little Grenada, their rationale being that there were Americans at a medical school there, and they wanted to make sure that they were all right. And so Americans went in. We liberated them, in quotes, not that there was any threat to their lives. And what we then saw was a series of articles in the major media discussing how, while Sir Eric was gone, his private quarters in the Prime Minister's residence were raided, and literature on demonology and devil worship and things were found there. And he was highly discredited. I don't know whether he was able to take up permanent residence as a political refugee, so to say, but it did not end well. And for me, you have to observe yourself and know your own leanings and realize that you may be just predisposed to certain ways of thinking. But logic suggested to me nothing less than some kind of aspect of punishment. You bring this up and you want it to be taken seriously, you better watch your back. And in this case, a particularly small country with no standing military, their leader out of the country at the time, and they're just knocked over, and this nonsensical explanation is given. Next image. How does this picture fit into what we've just been saying? Well, the backstory here is quite a wonderful one. This image, these two images, are of a young man who grew up in New Hampshire and was completely taken, like a lot of us contemporaries at the time, by the folk movement of the 1960s. His name was Lee Spiegel, and he decided he was going to become a professional folk singer. With his parents' love and support, he moved down to Queens, New York, found an apartment, started to haunt the West Village, got gigs, and started to make a name for himself as a folk singer. Next image. However, in 1975, he was with 5 friends, and they encountered what we're seeing right here, a extraordinarily memorable triangular craft that shone a blue light right into where they were. This months before the far better known blue light incident involving a logger in Arizona named Travis Walton. The two of them later became very good friends and connected on this. But perhaps not surprisingly, Lee's career, the thing that he wanted more than anything, completely fell away. And he became obsessed with the subject of UFOs, started to learn everything he could about it. Next image. Then he did something. There's a Yiddish word, it's called chutzpah. It's guts, outrageous willingness to take a chance. Lee did something remarkable. He's maybe in his mid-20s, and he learns that the prime minister of this little country in the Caribbean takes UFOs seriously. So what does he do? He writes him a long letter telling him that he takes them seriously too, and that as a world leader, he should really consider bringing this issue to the United Nations. In other words, to start with, this initiative was not the idea of Sir Eric Gehry or any other world leader. It was the idea of a nice Jewish boy from New Hampshire who wanted to be a folk singer, who had a UFO experience, and who then decided that nothing was going to hold him back from making a mark in the work. Well, Sir Eric wrote him back and responded, "Where would I even start?" It's all being done by letter. And Lee writes back, "I will find the greatest experts in the world. You supply the budget, bring me into the picture so that I can function officially, and we'll bring it to the UN." Next picture. There's Lee at about the time and his official Grenada advisor statue. I laugh because I love this guy. We lost him about 2 years ago. He was such a good friend, a brilliant sense of humor, and one of the great optimists in the work. You may know Lee's name because he established himself as probably the most credible and respected UFO-centric journalist in the world in his years with the Huffington Post, and then as an independent investigator. Next image. Here's a photo. Again, on the left, we see Gordon Cooper. Next to him, Jacques Vallée. Not sure who that next person is. Then Dr. Hynek. In the corner, Sir Eric. At the head of the table, Secretary General Waldheim. And you'll see just over from Waldheim, a dark head of hair kind of going down into a beard. That's Lee Spiegel. Next. On the left, you will also see these small color pictures. Stanton Friedman, Lee, Wellington Friday, Sir Eric, Hynek, and no, it's Lee and then Hynek and then Coyne. On the photo on the right, and I didn't realize for 10 years that these pictures were taken in color until Lee and I met 10 years later. And began our friendship with a surprise, which was him telling me this story that he was the one, and which I was able to certainly verify not long after. At the time, Lee was the youngest radio talk show host in America, with a syndicated show on NBC radio coming out of New York City. And I was a guest on a show, and that was the beginning of our friendship. The thing about the photo on the right that I find so engaging is that we have the executive assistant to this particular world leader leaning in and talking with Lee Spiegel. Next image. Certain people in your lives, you lose them, but you never lose them. They are always with you. We had so many laughs together over the years and a lot of serious contemplation as well. Next. A picture of the two of us with Paul Davids, Renaissance man, filmmaker, painter, writer, animator, extraordinary guy. The reason I wanted to end this talk on this particular note is for all of you that are in the work or interested in it and getting more interested at a time in our world where the ridicule factor is not something that will destroy a career, that every year more and more people care less and less what other people think about this subject, and that some of you may kind of move into this work more or less professionally, like I did, like Ryan did, and like other people did. You're writing your own destiny here. And this is one of the finest examples of an individual changing history because of a strong belief and not even considering why am I even trying? How could this happen, with me writing to a world leader? Well, it happened. And the fact that the motion was allowed to die in committee is no less of a reflection It's okay to lose, but it's not okay to want to make something happen and then back out because you're afraid of failing. I know Ryan knows as a trained actor. I know, working in the theater for many years in New York, that your chances of getting a job when you go for an audition are minimal and sometimes absurd. But you go anyway, and you do your best work, and you look your sharpest, and you are your most upbeat. I think back to Coleman von Kovetsky, who, in telling me the story of his life, told me that some years after he had emigrated to America and was making a good living as a consultant to some of the most respected camera and film companies in the world, Agfa, Nikon, of course, Hasselblad, Kodak, that he was approached by two CIA officers who were very unhappy that he had given the next Secretary of Defense, U Thant, information that the Americans found embarrassing, namely that U Thant had said in 1967 that next to the war in Vietnam, the most important issue facing the UN was UFOs, and that if he didn't find a way to recant or withdraw or make U Thant realize that the information he gave him was inaccurate, that they would break him, that he would never have any other income except for Social Security and the little books that he printed, to sell at UFO conferences. And there he is in his study in Queens, New York, telling me this story, and gave me a big smile. And he said, they told me this, and I told them they could go F themselves. And he said, and you know what? They were absolutely right, with a big laugh. I never made any other income except my books, and at the same time, my Social Security. A personal account. I hope you find it of interest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Peter. If I may, could I ask you a question to kind of bring us up to date with everything that's going on? And we can include this or take it out if you please. But we just had our third congressional UFO UAP hearing in history that took place recently. I'd love to get your thoughts on that in relation to this sort of being one of the first times a committee or initiative was brought forward at the UN, but now these things are happening on the floor in Washington, D.C. So do you see any similarities between what Lee put together back then that you attended and what is going on now in the discussion within the U.S. government and UFOs?
That's a great question, Ron. Yes and no. Yes, in the obvious aspect that there was a public hearing, a series of these meetings that I was fortunate enough to attend, where it's fair to say leading names at the time, still leading names, dead or alive, were out there speaking to world leaders and getting in their faces to a degree relative to the Lieutenant Colonel Coyne's event and the Frederick Valentich disappearance. What we're now seeing, I guess you could say, is the progeny of that event, but we're in such a different frame of reference. Back then, flying saucers and little green men, you must be crazy. Now, you could be Avi Loeb, and know that in no way are you going to damage your reputation or your job standing at Harvard. You can be any of these extraordinarily courageous, interesting, and really fascinating figures that are coming forward in these hearings as whistleblowers or informants of sorts. But we are seeing, and I think it's certainly an advance, we are seeing our elected officials in the House of Representatives not just take an active interest in this subject, but realize its importance. And in some cases, I'm sure the implications for humanity. I would like to add that in our increasingly fractured and divisive political reality that we are in right now in the United States of America, whichever side you fall on, this subject is one of the very few, next to the slow destruction of the environment of our home planet, that should be transcendently above politics. And in fact, we are seeing signs of that. Ideological opposites within the House. And I guess two of the best examples are former senator from Florida, now currently Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and one of my senators from New York State, Kirsten Gillibrand. Ideological opposites in that one is, as emblematic of a conservative as possible, and the other a progressive liberal, who work together on this subject. And although I've never seen anything personal regarding their relationship, I cannot help but think that working on this matter and creating legislation regarding it brought them together in a way where they recognized, number one, each other's innate intelligence and humanity, and whether or not they became friends or friendly. I guess the bottom line here is that people of absolute ideological opposites can find common ground here. In what we're facing is a true mystery. And it's one of the very few issues, aside from, again, environmental concerns and global warming, that has a chance of bringing human beings of opposite political viewpoints together. And we need that more now than at any time, I think, since I've been alive.
Absolutely. It's right there in the name, the United Nations. I think you're right, Peter. This can truly bring people together more than it could ever tear them apart. That's for sure. Awesome. Well, two last questions for you. Is there anywhere that we can find out more of what you're up to, or if people want to reach out to you? And any final words for our audience here at ANOMACON?
I find myself at this point in what I'll laughingly call my career as something of an underachiever. My website has been down for several years now, and I just haven't gotten it back up. People can contact me directly at my email address. That's my first initial and last name, PROBBINSNY @yahoo.com, or on my Facebook page. And amazing as it is, there are more than one Peter Robbins in the world on Facebook. I have a friend I refer to as the other Peter Robbins. He's out west, but I'm the Peter Robbins outside of Ithaca, New York. And otherwise, I post whatever I'm doing on the Facebook page. We'll have that website up and running sometime before aliens contact us, and also keep you posted on developments in what I'm doing and working on.
Amazing. Peter, the United Nations UFO Committee Initiative, A Personal Reminiscence with Peter Robbins. This was fantastic. I found it so rewarding. So thank you so much for joining us at ANOMACON.
I'm so glad to have been a part of it.